Hello and welcome to this session on understanding the roles and responsibilities of the IQA in a teaching and learning environment. So let's look at the role of the IQA and think about that there's two parts. There's the sampling of evidence and then there's the leadership. Now, they come as two separate qualifications, and it's important we understand the boundaries of each qualification and the duties. So we'll start off with the lead IQA. Now, the lead IQA is responsible for the assessment team, and traditionally in a teaching and learning environment they are a subject expert within their field, and they are responsible for the overall quality assurance process. So what that means is they'll be responsible for recruitment of assessment staff, that they're looking at the right skills and occupational competencies. So it makes sense that one of the roles of the IQA is to ensure that your CPD, continual professional development, is up to date. Now, what this means isn't just that I do online training. That does not demonstrate occupational competence. We want you to go back to the sector, hands-on, practical evidence that you know what's going on contemporary within your sector. That means throughout the year you need to demonstrate at least 2 weeks practical hands-on activities, and the IQA is completely within their right to ask for evidence of this. Now, evidence of that can come via a multitude of ways. It can come via reflective accounts, it can come via witness testimonies, but you should have some kind of online recording log of this. It's part of just being a professional and maintaining professional standards. What they're also responsible for are standardisations. Now, standardisations are about looking at the curriculum and the assessment decisions being made amongst the assessment staff. They're not a series of team meetings. It is truly about looking at curriculum, pulling the curriculum apart and making sure that we are benchmarking and marking fairly. And therefore, it makes perfect sense that if we work in a subcontract way, we bring those together to be able to benchmark. They are also responsible for managing the assessment team and allocating. So looking at how many learners an assessor or teacher has, and then looking at the quality of planning, feedback and judgments that's being made. So the role of the lead verifier has that management responsibility. It's their responsibility to make sure that there is a sampling plan in place that is effective. It is simply not good enough to say, well, I did the plan and that's it. It needs to be reviewed, it needs to be critiqued, it needs to be pulled apart and tested. It's part of the self-assessment requirements and the quality improvement plans. So look at your lead IV almost as a line manager, because that's what they're there for. They're there to manage and lead the internal quality assurance process. They will be experts within the fields. Now, what a lead IQA may not be is a qualified teacher. And remember, teaching is a different functionality to lead internal quality assuring. You don't necessarily need to be a qualified teacher to understand the internal quality assurance processes or lead people. Right, so now let's look at the role of the IQA. So the role of the IQA when sampling is to devise the sampling plan up front. This needs to be done the moment the first class starts. So once the teacher or tutor or assessor has started their first cohort, they will devise the sampling plan. All the names going down, the units going across, and they will pick a standardised unit on the top. For example, if I had 10 units, Unit 1 might be my first standardised unit. Unit 2 might be my second standardised unit in the following 6 months. The standardised unit is the unit that everyone is going to sample, meaning it is 100% sampled with every learner. So every learner's file will be checked against that unit. And that means we have a strong, robust internal quality assurance process against that unit. But then what we have to be sure is that every learner over a period of a qualification and every sample then has been, every unit has been sampled over a period of time. So what that means is I might have 5 learners and 10 units. So therefore I'll test 2 units, 2 units, 2 units, 2 units, 2 units. So over a period of time, every unit has been sampled at least twice within that cycle. Okay, so that's the sampling plan. Then, when I do my sampling report, I'm simply going to be looking at, does the evidence meet, do I agree with the assessor's decision? Can I see the assessment cycle? So, is there a plan? Does it demonstrate that the learner took part in that plan? Is the plan a true reflection of the learner? Does it show the inclusivity and differentiation it needs to? Does it meet the assessment criteria and have the right assessment methods been used and picked? Do I agree that this plan is safe, fair and robust? If I do, great. I'd sample the plan. I might initially put my date on it to say this is the date that I saw. From that plan, you should be able to track the evidence because that's what's been collected from the plan. So ideally, it should tie in. So plan 1 might be to write a reflective account, a learner journal. It might say, learner to create a learner journal discussing roles and responsibilities of their job role. Evidence 1. I should then be able to go to an evidence index and find that within minutes, well, seconds. I read the piece of work and I go through it. And I'm going to track back to see if I agree with the assessment decision. So the 2 things that I'm looking for is the judgment. Has the assessor given me a clear judgment? Meaning, do I agree or disagree that the evidence is safe, valid, fair and reliable and it is sufficient? Does it do all of those things? And if I do I then agree that every outcome that evidence is pinned against, it's met? Now if I do agree, great. I'll sign it, date it, I'll go back and tick that off the plan. I'll circle my sampling plan to say Unit 1 sampled, evidence sampled, and I'm happy with that. If I find a piece of evidence and I think, you know what, overall I agree, but I think this is weak, I'm not going to then be so happy. Something in my stomach will go, ooh, it's too weak. Then hopefully there'll be another piece of evidence in the learner portfolio that will back up the first piece of evidence. So I'll start to dig a little bit more now. I'm starting to look for a bit more to why the assessor has signed this off. Now if there's further evidence there, I might then look at evidence A and evidence B, and between the 2 pieces of evidence be absolutely satisfied that the learner is competent. But what if I'm still not? Well then if I'm still not, then I'm going to reject that piece of work and I'm going to reject the feedback. And I'm going to say, look, it's still too weak. Over these 2 pieces, I'm still not sure you have sufficient coverage. Now, what that might involve is that might involve me calling the learner and talking to the learner and saying, look, I've got your portfolio, I'm looking at pieces of A and B. Could you just explain to me a little bit more? And that's absolutely fine, because I might just need to justify in my head why this decision's been made. And if I make that phone call, I'm going to write it on the plan. Spoke to learner, spoke to the assessor, and that might be enough for me to see how the evidence was produced. But remember, if I'm having to do that, then the external quality assurance and Ofsted are simply going to really struggle. So you then have to really justify why you've then signed that off. Ultimately, what we really want from our assessors is to justify their assessment decisions. And it would be even better if we could get the learners to justify why they think they've met the unit as a whole. So at the end of the unit and at the end of gathering all the evidence, in a unit summary sheet, it would be really great for the assessor to say, I'm deeming this learner competent because I've assessed 3 ranges of evidence, and over those 3 ranges, they've clearly demonstrated here, here, and here. Over a period of time, I've observed this, this, and this. And it would be even super if the candidate was to go, I know I'm competent against these units because I've demonstrated this here, here, and here. Clearly, beyond reasonable doubt, showing that learning has taken place and assessment was effective and that the candidate has truly understood their roles and responsibilities. Remember, as the IQA, you are that safety net. You are the person that has to, beyond reasonable doubt, sign off that learner's work as authentic, current, and sufficient. And if you're not sure, it is your responsibility to challenge it. Under no circumstances should you be signing a unit off if you have any doubt of its validity. You cannot, when a qualified IQA, state, I didn't know, or I missed it, or I'm really sorry, I missed that. And finally, we use a plagiarism tracker. We use Grammarly within our service, and that will scan up the learner's work and it will tell us how much has been copied. We cannot accept copied work. Now, you're going to hear different people talking about plagiarism and how much is or is not acceptable. Let me be very, very clear on my stance. No amount of work plagiarised is acceptable. Some will say 10%, some will say 15%, some will say 20%, some even go up to 30%. Quite frankly, if a learner has copied something and they have not put it into their own words, then they have not demonstrated the correct knowledge and understanding. Now, if they have copied something and it is plagiarised, but they've declared the source and they are using this as an example, then that's fine. That's not plagiarism because they've declared it. We are talking about when a learner is passing off other ideas and thoughts as somebody else's. Now, there's only one way that you can really test that if you've done the electronic test, and that's to question the learner. I simply do not understand IQAs that can sign off portfolios and make a decision that the learner's work is sufficient without questioning the learner. Meaning at some point you should have had a candidate interview, even if it's a couple of minutes long, just to say, I've sampled this work, tell me, in Unit 1 you've said this, what did you mean by that? And if the learner can articulate the answer, then that's absolutely fine. But you'll get a feel straight away whether or not the learner can articulate that answer back to you. If you sign work off as sufficient and it goes to the awarding body and it is not, then you will be the one that is responsible for your actions. So please, do not sign work off that you do not think is sufficient. And certainly do not sign work off that you cannot authenticate. And remember, authentication is not just a signed declaration. It is a test that you have checked the evidence to be reliable. It meets the learner's ability. The language is appropriate to that learner. It goes back to the initial assessment and we can see that that's at the learner's level. It's all of the same handwriting. It's all of a computer type and language. If I'm listening to electronic evidence, the learner's flowing and it sounds like the learner, and it doesn't sound like they're reading or they're stopping and starting. At any point, if you feel the learner or the evidence cannot be authenticated, then please make sure you write this, block the evidence, and make sure we go and do an investigation. If you sign that off, it will go down as maladministration and it will look like that we're colluding or coercing with learners. So please, do your role as safely and as fairly as you can, and let's make sure that every learner that goes through our centre has gone through a safe, secure, robust process. We do not want to give licences to practice to people who simply don't deserve them. That's your role to guard internal quality assurance. There will be further videos and further training on the IQA process, but it's about understanding your roles and responsibilities, so I hope you found this video useful. Thanks for watching.